I got a kid from my affair instead of my husband when he found out he ruined me. Hey Reddit, I've been lurking around this community for a while, and I've always loved reading the posts and the advice people share here. It's a place where people always get given great advice. I never imagined that I'd be the one sharing my story with all of you, but here I am, desperate for some advice, and hoping that someone out there can help me figure out what to do next. My name is Jane, and I'm 35 years old. My husband's name is Ray, and he's 33. We've been married for about 2 years. Yes, I know, not a very long time. But before we tied the knot, we dated for 7 years, so it feels like we've been together for ages. For the most part, our relationship has been nothing short of amazing. Ray has always been the perfect husband, the kind of man you only hear about in fairy tales or see in movies. Ray has taken such good care of me over the years. He's been my rock, my protector, and my best friend. From the moment we got married, he insisted that I didn't need to work. He wanted me to focus on being a stay-at-home wife and later a mom without having to stress about a career or anything else. He's always been so involved in our marriage, planning romantic nights, going out of his way to make me feel special, and just generally being the kind of husband every woman dreams of. I genuinely love Ray with all my heart. I respect him, and I've always appreciated everything he's done for me. But as perfect as he's been, I can't say the same about myself. There was a time when we hit a rough patch, and that's when I made a mistake. A mistake that I deeply regret, and that's now threatening to destroy everything we've built together. I would be lying if I said I never suspected that our daughter wasn't Ray's child. From the moment she was born, I noticed that she didn't resemble him at all. Sure, she looked like me in some ways, but as she grew, it became increasingly evident that she had some of my affair partner's facial features. The resemblance was undeniable, and it would eat at me every time I looked at her. By the time our daughter was approaching her 3rd birthday, the doubt had become a persistent worry for me. I decided to get a DNA test done in secret. I knew that I might be confirming my worst fears, but the curiosity was killing me. I didn't tell Ray, and when the results came back, they confirmed that she was, in fact, not Ray's biological child. My heart sank. I didn't know what to do. I was paralyzed by fear and unable to think clearly. My mind raced with all the possible consequences. I told myself that if I revealed the truth, I would lose everything: my marriage, my family, my support system. Everyone would blame me for the deception, and I would be left utterly alone. More than that, our daughter would lose the father she adored. Ray had always been a loving and devoted parent to her, and she loved him dearly. The thought of her losing that was unbearable. In my desperation, I made the decision to keep the truth hidden. I convinced myself that it didn't matter if she wasn't Ray's biological child. What mattered was the love and bond they shared. Ray had embraced her as his own, and in my mind, that was enough. I told myself that I would never tell anyone, that the secret would die with me. I had quit my job shortly after finding out I was pregnant, choosing to focus on being a stay-at-home wife and mom. I had not seen my affair partner since I ended things with him, and I even heard that he moved away from town a year ago. It was good because he wouldn't be around to question or challenge my decisions. My affair partner was, frankly, someone I consider scum, and not someone who would fight for his place in our daughter's life. So I continued with my life, trying to maintain the facade of the happy family we were. I convinced myself that this was the best thing to do, even though I knew deep down that it was a terrible mistake. I managed to push the guilt and anxiety aside and focused on making sure Ray and our daughter continued to live their seemingly perfect life. Things continued to be great for a very long time. Ray and I were happy in our marriage. His relationship with our daughter was wonderful, and even with all the stress and guilt I was carrying, there were moments when I almost forgot about the mistake I had made. It felt like everything was settling into a routine. Ray's family, on the other hand, had always had a problem with me. I won't even sugarcoat it. His sisters and his mom never liked me from the start. I think it had to do with the fact that Ray is her only son, and his mother is especially clingy. They would make subtle comments and jokes about how our daughter didn't look like Ray. It was as if they were constantly trying to highlight the differences. Ray, though, was always supportive. He'd brush off their comments and even threaten to cut them off if they didn't stop. He didn't want our daughter to overhear their negativity or grow up hearing it and have doubts about her place in our family. For a while, it seemed like the issue was behind us. I honestly believed that Ray would never find out the truth, and I let myself think that maybe, just maybe, everything would be all right. But then, everything fell apart. Ray was always such a solid rock in our lives, and I should have known he'd get suspicious at some point. Our daughter fell ill and had to be hospitalized for a while. When she needed a blood donation, we suggested that Ray do it. However, he wasn't a match, which made him more curious. Ray works in cybersecurity, so he doesn't know much about genetics or DNA. When he mentioned his confusion about not being a match, I quickly told him it was probably just because she matched me and not him. He seemed to buy it, and I ended up being the one to donate blood for our daughter. She got better and was discharged from the hospital, and for a little while, things seemed normal. But then, last night, everything changed. Ray confronted me in the evening. Our daughter was already in bed, and we were about to turn in ourselves when Ray handed me a document and asked me to read it. I looked at it and felt my world crumble. It was a DNA test result confirming that Ray was not our daughter's biological father. I was struck dumb. I didn't know what to say, how to defend myself. Ray didn't wait for me to say anything. He just stormed out of the house. Since then, I've been trying to reach him, calling him, texting him, but he hasn't responded. It's been a whole day now, and I'm beyond worried. What if something has happened to him? I'm even thinking about going to the police to report him missing. My parents and siblings won't pick up their phones either. I feel utterly isolated. Our daughter is asking about Ray, and I don't know what to tell her. I'm at a loss and feel like I have no one to turn to. Reddit, please, if you have any advice, I'm begging you to share it. I know I've made terrible mistakes, and I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I still want to fight for my marriage, for my family. I love Ray, and I don't want to lose him, but I don't know how to fix this. Update. Hey Reddit, it's me again. Wow, I have to say the backlash from my last post was intense. I get it, I messed up, and I know I deserve the criticism. But can we ease up on the hate? I'm just a person like everyone else, and I can't help but think that a lot of the hate comes from people who might be dealing with their own issues. Anyway, as for the update. Ray finally came home about 2 days after I posted. He was incredibly distant, but at least he was interacting with our daughter. I was terrified he might ignore her, but thankfully he didn't. He played with her, took her to preschool, and then told me we needed to talk. He said he'd be back after picking up our daughter, and we'd have a serious discussion. When he returned, he dropped the bombshell. He said he wanted a divorce and was going to sue me for emotional distress and paternity fraud. He was adamant about removing his name from our daughter's birth certificate, and he made it clear that he wanted me out of his life. I was floored. I started crying, not knowing what to do. He said I had to pack up and leave before picking up our daughter from preschool, and then take her to my parents' house. He didn't want to see us again, except in court. It felt like he was operating on autopilot. He ignored me when I spoke, and he didn't even react to my tears. He made sure I left the house, and he even took the car, so I had to call an Uber. By the time I got to my parents' place, Ray had already cleared out our joint account. My parents were stunned to see me, and, naturally, were not pleased when they found out what I had done. They were angry and blamed me entirely, calling me a cheater and saying I brought this on myself. They only agreed to house me because of our daughter. So living with my parents has been less than ideal. They've been supportive to an extent, but there's a lot of tension, and the atmosphere is anything but comforting. Ray and I haven't spoken since. It's been about 3 days now, and our daughter keeps asking about him. I don't know what to tell her. I feel lost and confused. I'm trying to piece together how everything I worked for could collapse in just a few days. Update. Hey Reddit, it's me again. Sorry it took me a while to update. Things have been really confusing and overwhelming. I've been trying to figure out what to do next, and it feels like I'm just stuck. I reached out to Ray, hoping he might at least consider visiting our daughter or something, but he flat out refused. I honestly thought he might just ignore my message, but he responded and said he wouldn't because she isn't his daughter. He also warned me that I'd be served with legal papers soon, so I need to prepare myself. I'm honestly scared about what's coming next. My parents have said they're going to try talking to him directly. They think it's better to talk face-to-face than over the phone, so they plan to go to his house when they know he'll be there. Ray has a pretty regular schedule, so they shouldn't have too much trouble catching him. My parents are pretty good at persuading people, so I'm hoping they can convince him to at least talk to me or work something out. Other than that, there's not much new to report. I've seen a lot of comments suggesting I should get a job, and yes, I know, I will definitely look for work. Even if Ray were to forgive me, I'm determined to get a job because I never want to be in a situation like this again. Right now, I'm relying on my parents since I don't have any savings and no job. So, finding employment is a priority for me, and I'm already in the process of job searching. Thanks for all the advice and patience. I'll update you as soon as I have more news. Update. Hey Reddit, I promised I'd update you after my parents talked to Ray, and here I am. Unfortunately, things didn't go as I'd hoped. Like many of you predicted, Ray refused to listen to my parents. I really should have taken your advice and told them not to try talking to him. Ray was firm and unwilling to hear them out. He told them he's done with me and our daughter. He made it clear that he can't accept being a father to a child that isn't his. And the fact that I'd lied to him for years until he discovered the truth only made things worse. My parents tried to persuade him to at least settle for a divorce and avoid legal action, but he was adamant about suing. He said he wanted me to stop texting him and trying to get him to visit our daughter. So it seems he's completely done with us. I'm struggling to come to terms with all of this. It feels like everything I built over the past few years is crumbling in a matter of weeks. It's barely been 3 weeks since I moved in with my parents, and things have spiraled out of control so quickly. I still don't know how to explain this to my daughter. I keep telling her that Ray is away on a trip, but I'm running out of excuses. Ray also told my parents to expect legal papers soon. I'm honestly at a loss for what to do next. On top of everything, I know I need to start looking for a job. I've asked my parents if they know of any openings at their workplaces, and they said they'd help me look into it. I'm hoping something will come up soon. Update. Hey Reddit, it's been a while since my last update. I know many of you have been asking for news, but honestly, I didn't have much to share and I've been incredibly busy. I wanted to wait until I had something significant to update on. Right now, I'm in a whirlwind of confusion and trying to get my life back on track. So here's what's been happening. Even though I'm not in a solid job yet, I've managed to pick up a small side gig. It's not much, but it's something and helps with the bills. I've been trying to stay focused on job hunting and figuring out my next steps. Today was a particularly rough day. I got served with legal papers from Ray, and it hit me hard. I guess he wasn't joking when he said he'd sue me. He's not just asking for a divorce, he's suing me for emotional distress and paternity fraud. I'm still in shock. It feels like my world has come crashing down, and I'm left trying to pick up the pieces. I reacted poorly and sent him a message, lashing out and blaming him for everything. I told him that this was exactly why I didn't want to tell him the truth in the first place, because I knew it would lead to this. I told him he's broken our daughter's heart, and I don't think I'll ever forgive him for that. I'm scared and overwhelmed. It feels like I've lost everything: my marriage, my family, and the life I knew. I never imagined things would spiral this badly. I'm not sure how to fix this, or if things will ever get better. The constant messages and demands for updates are adding to my stress, and I'm finding it hard to cope, so please tone it down a bit. I appreciate the few who have been supportive, but please understand that I need space right now. I'll update when I have something meaningful to share. Update. Hey Reddit, I wanted to share something that's been weighing heavily on me. I really need to vent. Ray's mom and sisters are absolutely overjoyed about everything that's happened. They've been relentlessly sending me messages, calling me all sorts of names: cheater, horrible person, you name it. I've been blocking their numbers, but new ones just keep popping up, and the harassment doesn't seem to stop. I'm at my wit's end trying to handle this. I'm in the process of reaching out to Ray. I'm hoping he might help me address the situation with his family and tell them to stop. I'm feeling completely overwhelmed and exhausted. I'm struggling to keep everything together, and the constant negativity is making me feel crazy, sick, and hopeless. Through all this, my daughter remains the one positive thing in my life. She's my rock and my reason for trying to stay strong, but it's hard to balance everything when I'm dealing with so much emotional and mental strain. I don't know what else to do or how to make this stop. I just needed to vent and let you all know how much this is affecting me. Update. Hey Reddit, I know many of you have been asking for an update, and I appreciate your concern. I'm not entirely sure what you're expecting me to say, but here's where I'm at right now. The hate messages from Ray's mom and siblings have stopped, thankfully. I reached out to him and he must have talked to them. I've got a job interview lined up for next week. I really need this job to help stabilize my situation, so if you could wish me luck, I'd really appreciate it. On another note, things are quite tough financially. My parents don't have much saved up, and we're lucky to even own the house we live in. It's been a struggle to make ends meet, and now with the legal issues piling up, I'm feeling the pressure. I know I need a lawyer to handle the lawsuit and help me navigate this mess, but the cost of legal representation is scary. I'm trying to figure out how to manage this. And I'm also doing my best to stay afloat, but it's been challenging. I'll update when I have more news, but for now, I'm focused on getting a job or even more side gigs so I can afford legal representation. Update. Hey Reddit, it's me again. I promised I'd update after the interview, and unfortunately, I didn't get the job. I really needed that position, but things didn't work out. I'm still job hunting, and it's been very tough. In the meantime, I'm juggling a few side gigs to make ends meet. I'm currently working multiple jobs just to cover bills, feed my daughter and afford her expenses, and contribute to household expenses. My parents have been helping as much as they can, but they have their own financial limits, so I've had to step up and take on as much work as possible. On the legal front, my parents have offered to help with some of the costs for a lawyer, which is a relief. I'm really looking forward to putting all this legal trouble behind me. I know Ray probably won't forgive me, and that's something I've come to terms with. Right now, I just want to focus on moving forward and trying to rebuild my life. Update.
Hey Reddit.
I didn't want to update until I had something solid to share, and I've been avoiding it because of the relentless hate comments and nasty DMs. Despite that, people kept asking for an update, so here's where things stand now that the legal trouble is mostly over. First off, the divorce has been finalized. It was a whole process of its own. I didn't get anything from the divorce, no assets or debts to split. The tricky part was figuring out what to do about our daughter. Since Ray's name was still on the birth certificate, he was legally considered her father. So, while I got custody, Ray was obligated to pay child support. He wasn't happy about it at all, but he didn't have a choice. He only managed to make a few payments before the emotional distress and paternity fraud claims went to court. As many of you guessed, Ray won the case. His lawyers argued that what I did was premeditated and cruel, that I lied to him knowingly and intentionally. My lawyers tried to argue that it was a mistake and that everyone makes mistakes, but unfortunately that didn't hold up. I ended up having to pay Ray a significant amount of money, which drained almost all of our savings. So that's where things stand. I probably won't be updating again. I'm posting this in a rush because if I don't do it now, I might never get around to it. Thanks to those who supported me, however few they might have been, and I hope this is the last of it. Update.
Hey Reddit.
I didn't plan to update again, but I've been flooded with DMs asking for more details, saying my last update was rushed and unclear. I'll try to clear up a few things, though honestly I'm not thrilled about being here. So, as I mentioned before, Ray won the case. I had to pay him a significant amount of money, which wiped out nearly all our savings. He also got his name removed from our daughter's birth certificate, so legally he is no longer considered her father. This means he's no longer obligated to pay child support. He's completely cut ties with us, blocked us on all social media, and has no contact with us. This situation has left us in a dire financial situation. We were on the brink of homelessness for a while. My parents have also been struggling to support us, and it's been incredibly tough. I've been working multiple jobs just to keep us afloat, and it's taken a huge toll on me physically. I've lost a significant amount of weight because of the stress and exhaustion from juggling so many jobs. The impact on my health is very noticeable. I'm barely managing to get by, and it's so hard seeing myself change so drastically because of everything that has happened. I'm doing my best to stay strong for my daughter, but it's really challenging. I hope to find some stability soon and get things back on track, both financially and personally. On top of that, the transition has been hard on my daughter. She misses her dad and has cried for him repeatedly. I'm planning to get her into therapy when I can afford it, but right now, funds are tight. I also feel heartbroken at the thought of my daughter growing up without a father figure. It is weighing heavily on me. I feel like I've let her down in the worst way possible.
and that
I've even considered reaching out to my former affair partner, thinking maybe he could somehow step in and be a positive male influence in her life. But every time I entertain that idea, I end up backing away. I'm terrified of making things even more complicated and potentially causing more harm. I know it's my fault that things ended up this way. I just want to ensure my daughter's well-being and stability. I'm aware I'll have to explain everything to her when she's older, and that thought is overwhelming. I don't know what else to say. Things have been finalized, and I've lost a lot. It's all my fault, and I know it. Reddit can be a pretty toxic place, and updating here feels like a painful reminder of everything that's gone wrong. And yes, I know it's my fault, but that doesn't mean I want to be constantly reminded of it. Hello, Reddit. I genuinely never thought I'd find myself writing one of these posts. I know a lot of people say that all the time, but I'm being honest here. I'm using a throwaway account because I don't want this linked to my main account. I feel like my world is crumbling, and I desperately need to share my story. It's a long one, and if you've got the patience, I could really use your advice and support. So, let me start from the beginning just so you all understand. My name is Jenna, and I've been married to David for 5 years. We met in college and hit it off instantly. And when I say instantly, I truly mean it. From the moment we met, it felt like we had known each other forever. We understood each other on a level that felt almost supernatural. Honestly, we were like soulmates. We got married right after graduation because from the moment we met, we knew we wanted to spend the rest of our lives with each other. For the first few years, things were great. We were both ambitious, working hard, and enjoying our lives together. David has always been the kind of guy who is there for me. He's supportive, loving, and goes the extra mile for our relationship and marriage. Only now do I fully appreciate how much he invested in us. David has always been the one to plan date nights, outings, and weekend getaways. You name it, and David was the one who took charge. I never really put in the same effort. If David didn't do it, I wouldn't. As time went on, life got busier. We both got caught up in our careers and the responsibilities that came with them. David came from a wealthy family, and it seemed like everything was handed to him effortlessly. This made me feel like I had to work extra hard to catch up and be on the same level. I threw myself into my career, pushing myself to achieve and succeed. I thought that if I could just work harder, I would catch up to David and everything would fall into place. We bought a house, started thinking about starting a family, and the everyday grind took over. My focus shifted almost entirely to my career and the new responsibilities that came with it. In the midst of all this, I neglected our relationship. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was taking David for granted. I let our connection slide, believing that our love was strong enough to endure without constant effort. But now, looking back, I see how wrong I was. I had this naive belief that David would always be there, that our bond was unbreakable and unshakable. As I became more absorbed in my own world, I neglected the most important person in my life. It wasn't until recently that I realized just how much I'd let our relationship deteriorate. David had always been the one who made things special and kept the spark alive, while I just coasted along. I stopped putting in any effort. I wouldn't even bother attending date nights, even after David had gone through all the trouble of planning them. I'd ignore reminders about our plans, and fell into a routine where David felt more like a roommate than a partner. I thought he'd always be there, that he would never leave, no matter how little I did to maintain our relationship. I assumed that because he was so patient and understanding, he'd never walk away. I just couldn't imagine my life without David, so I took his presence for granted. One of the biggest examples of my neglect was when I completely forgot our anniversary last year. David had planned a special dinner at our favorite restaurant, and I was so wrapped up in a work project that I didn't even remember until the next morning. When I finally realized, I scrambled to make it up to him with a hastily planned dinner, but it felt insincere, even to me. I think that was when David started to feel like I no longer valued our time together.
and that
There were also countless times when David would come home from work, visibly stressed or upset, and instead of being there for him, I'd brush it off because I was too absorbed in my own issues. I remember one particular evening when David wanted to talk about a difficult situation at work. I was too preoccupied with my own career problems to listen, so I told him I was too tired to talk and suggested he deal with it on his own. In doing so, I dismissed him in a very cruel and rude way. David also had a tradition of planning weekend getaways for us to reconnect and unwind. But over time, I started making excuses not to go. Too much work, feeling too tired, or just wanting to stay home and catch up on my hobbies. My pattern of skipping out on our planned time together grew worse, and it started extending to date nights and movie nights. I didn't provide much support for his career goals either. When David started a new project at work that required long hours and extra effort, I didn't make any effort to support him. Instead of being understanding or offering help around the house, I was often frustrated by his absence and complained about how it affected my own schedule. I didn't consider how much he was sacrificing for his career and our future. I also ignored his efforts in our relationship. David was always the one who planned romantic gestures, like surprise dates or thoughtful gifts. But as time went on, I stopped reciprocating and didn't even make an effort to show appreciation. On several occasions, David would go out of his way to do something special for me, and I'd barely acknowledge it or return the gesture. David tried to talk to me about it a few times. He would mention how he felt neglected or how he missed the way things used to be. But honestly, I was so selfishly wrapped up in my own world that I didn't really listen. I'd brush off his concerns with a quick apology and then return to my busy schedule, believing that he would get over it. Looking back, I see now how deeply I hurt David and how my lack of effort contributed to the downfall of our relationship. I took his love and commitment for granted, and now I'm facing the consequences of my actions. It hurts extra hard because David always went the extra mile for me, always did everything with me in mind, and was consistently there for me. He was the kind of partner who supported my dreams and made every effort to ensure that I felt valued and loved. If only I had been there for David, half as much as he had been there for me, maybe things wouldn't have deteriorated to this point. David always supported my career goals, never once begrudging me the long hours I put in or the stress that came with it. Whenever I needed to vent about work frustrations, he was there to listen patiently and offer comforting words. He kept up with our weekend plans, even when I neglected them or made excuses to stay home. Every special occasion, from anniversaries to birthdays, David never forgot to celebrate. He always put in the effort to make each moment memorable, regardless of how inattentive or dismissive I was. Most people would have gotten tired and given up after repeatedly seeing how uninterested and uninvolved I was. But David didn't stop. He continued to do everything and be everything I needed, even when it was clear I wasn't reciprocating. His unwavering dedication was a testament to how much he cared, but I took that for granted. David didn't mind that I was neglecting him, didn't let it deter him from his role as a supportive and loving husband. He didn't let my disinterest or the fact that I often dismissed his feelings and needs stop him from trying to make our relationship work. He kept planning surprises, organizing getaways, and being my rock, despite how I treated him. He persisted in doing everything he could to maintain the spark in our relationship, all the while being met with my indifference. Now, looking back, I see just how much I've lost. David's selflessness and commitment showed me how deeply he cared, and it's devastating to realize that I didn't appreciate it enough when I had the chance. Things started to change more drastically around the time we celebrated our 5th anniversary. I had hoped that maybe a special trip or a romantic dinner would help us reconnect, but I was so caught up in work that I barely planned anything. I left everything to David, who did his best to make the day special. He arranged a beautiful dinner, booked a weekend getaway, and even took the time to write me a heartfelt letter expressing his love and commitment to our relationship. But despite all his efforts, I was too wrapped up in my own world to reciprocate. When the day finally came, I was called into work at the last minute. Instead of finding a way to prioritize our anniversary, I went to work, thinking I could make it up to him later. I told myself it wasn't a big deal, that David would understand. But when I called him to let him know, I could hear the disappointment in his voice. Still, I didn't grasp the full weight of what I was doing. I missed the dinner, the getaway, and every opportunity that day to show David how much he meant to me. Now that I think about it, that moment marked a significant turning point in our relationship. It was the first time I truly saw the hurt I was causing David, but even then, I didn't fully acknowledge it. I told myself that things would get better on their own, that David would bounce back as he always did. I didn't realize that he was slowly losing hope. After that anniversary, David's frustration began to show more clearly. He became more distant. His warm smiles and affectionate gestures began to grow fewer and farther between. Instead of spending weekends planning activities for us, as he usually did, he began filling his time with errands, solo outings, and work. It wasn't like him to be so disconnected, and although I noticed the change, I chose to ignore it. I thought that eventually things would fall back into place, that our love was strong enough to survive without any real effort on my part. But last month, everything came to a head. David came home one evening, looking more serious than I had ever seen him. He sat me down, and with a calm but firm voice, he told me he couldn't do it anymore. He said he felt like he was in a relationship with someone who didn't care about him, who was more of a roommate than a partner. He admitted he was tired of being the only one making an effort, of feeling like he was the only one who wanted to keep our relationship alive. Hearing those words broke something inside me. I wanted to argue, to beg him to stay, but I couldn't deny the truth in what he was saying. I knew I had neglected him, taken him for granted, and assumed he would always be there no matter how little I contributed to our relationship. I thought I could get away with doing the bare minimum because I was confident in his love for me. But now that I was faced with the reality that he was considering leaving, I realized how much I had misjudged the situation. David told me he needed time to think about what he wanted, but he made it clear that he was seriously considering ending things. Since that conversation, our relationship has been in limbo. David packed a bag and has been staying at his brother's place and left me alone in the house. It no longer feels like our home. The silence is deafening. I've spent countless nights lying awake, trying to figure out how to fix things, but it feels like it might be too late. I've been reflecting on how I let our relationship deteriorate, and the guilt is crushing. I've tried reaching out to David, asking if we can talk, if there's anything I can do to make it right, but every time, he's distant and unresponsive, which only deepens my fear that I've lost him for good. Part of me feels like David is overreacting, that maybe he's just tired and needs some space, but deep down, I know he also has a valid point. I let things slide for so long that it's no wonder he's reached his breaking point. I want to believe that I can change, that I can become the partner he needs, but I'm at a loss for how to convince him of that, if he's not even willing to talk to me. How do you prove you've changed when the other person has already started to walk away? The possibility of losing the most important person in my life is terrifying. I've made so many mistakes, and I'm not asking for sympathy. I just want advice from anyone who has been through something similar. Is there any way to repair a relationship after such a significant breakdown? Or is it too late once someone has decided to leave? How do I show David that I'm willing to put in the effort this time? And how do I cope with the fear of losing him, knowing that it's my fault? The weight of knowing that I had someone who went above and beyond for me, only for me to fail to reciprocate, is almost too much to bear. David gave everything he had, and I let it slip through my fingers. If you've ever been in a situation where you realized too late that you were taking someone for granted, how did you handle it? How did you rebuild the trust and connection that had been lost? Any wisdom or guidance would be deeply appreciated as I'm struggling to find a way forward. Update.
Hey, Reddit.
First off, I want to say a massive thank you to everyone who offered advice, shared their stories, and even to those who called me out. Your support and tough love really helped me see things from a different perspective. When I first posted, I was in a state of denial, and I didn't fully realize the extent of my mistakes. But hearing from so many of you, especially those who have been in similar situations, made me feel less alone and more accountable for my actions. So here's an update. A lot of you suggested that I should avoid saying that David was overreacting, and I wish I had taken that advice to heart. I made the mistake of bringing that up during one of our rare conversations, and it completely backfired. David had just started to open up a little, and when I mentioned that I thought he might be overreacting, he got really angry. He completely shut down after that, and I haven't been able to reach him since. I tried calling and texting, but he wouldn't respond. A few hours later, he sent me a message that was more painful to read than anything I could have imagined. It was a list of incidents, things I had done over the years that made him feel undervalued and unimportant. Reading through it was like a gut punch because I could see in black and white, just how much I had hurt him. David mentioned how I would often skip family gatherings. He said that he would invite me to his family's events or suggest visiting his friends for the weekend, but I would consistently decline. I always had an excuse: work, needing rest, or just not feeling up to it. Over time, his family started to notice my absence and began to ask if everything was okay between us. David said it put him in a really uncomfortable position because he had to keep making excuses for me, covering up for what was really just a lack of interest in spending time with his loved ones. He also pointed out how I ignored his achievements. David has always been my biggest supporter. Every time I got a promotion or reached a milestone, he would celebrate it like it was his own. But when he got a significant promotion at work, I barely acknowledged it. I gave him a quick congratulations and then moved on, not even taking the time to ask him what the promotion meant to him or to celebrate it properly. David said that even our friends and colleagues noticed this imbalance, how he would always talk about my successes, but when it was his turn, I didn't seem to care.
No.
One of the most painful things he mentioned was how I forgot his birthday one year. He had planned a small dinner with close friends and expected me to help with the preparations. But not only did I forget the date, when I finally remembered, I didn't make any effort to make it up to him. Our friends noticed my lack of involvement and even began to wonder if there were problems in our marriage. I didn't realize how much that had hurt him until he brought it up in his message. David also talked about how I constantly turned down his friends. He said that he would often try to include me in activities with his friends, like game nights or double dates. But I would frequently turn down these invitations, preferring to stay home or focus on work. Over time, his friends started noticing my absence and began asking why I never joined them. This put David in the awkward position of having to explain my constant rejections, which he said made him feel even more isolated. Another issue he brought up was my tendency to neglect important conversations. David said that on several occasions he tried to have serious discussions with me about our future, including starting a family or making long-term plans. But each time I would either brush off the conversation, change the subject, or show little interest in planning our life together. He said this made him feel like I didn't care about our future, and that even his closest friends started to notice his growing frustration. David also mentioned how I overlooked his health. He went through a period where he was under a lot of stress at work, and it started to affect his health. He began experiencing frequent headaches and fatigue. When he mentioned this to me, I showed little concern. I just told him to take a day off without really engaging or offering support. David said his coworkers noticed how much he was struggling and even suggested he see a doctor, but I remained largely indifferent. This, he said, further drove home the point that I wasn't paying attention to him. He also brought up how I would publicly undermine him. David said that during social events, I would sometimes make dismissive comments about him in front of our friends, joking about his hobbies or how much time he spent on certain tasks. He said that while I might have thought I was just being playful, he felt humiliated and unsupported. Our friends began to pick up on the tension and even asked him privately if everything was okay between us. One of the last things he mentioned was how I failed to participate in household decisions. David said that we had agreed early on to share responsibilities around the house, from finances to home maintenance. But over time, I started leaving all the decisions to him and showed little interest in participating. Whether it was choosing new furniture or managing our budget, David said he always found himself making decisions alone. Even when he asked for my input, I would dismiss him, which made him feel incredibly frustrated and alone in what is supposed to be a partnership. After laying all of this out, David said that if I still thought he was overreacting, he could go on because there were so many more examples of how I had made him feel unimportant and unloved. He said that it's exhausting to prioritize someone who doesn't prioritize you, and reading those words, I realized just how much I had taken him for granted. I'm at a loss now. I don't know how to make things right. I'm scared that I've lost the most important person in my life because I was too focused on myself to see what was happening right in front of me. I'm trying to figure out how to show David that I understand the depth of my mistakes and that I'm willing to change, but I don't even know where to start. For those of you who mentioned having been through something similar, how did you make amends? Is it even possible to repair a relationship after so much damage has been done? How do you cope with the fear of losing someone you truly love, especially when you know it's your own fault? I'm open to any advice or insights you might have. Thank you again for all your support. Update.
Hey Reddit, it's me again.
I wanted to give you all an update because I know a lot of you weighed in on my situation and gave me some pretty harsh truths. First off, I want to say that I hear you. A lot of you blamed me for my actions, and you're right. I was at fault. I made some terrible mistakes, and I own up to them. I didn't handle things the way I should have, and I understand why so many of you were disappointed in me. You said I messed up by telling David he was overreacting, and looking back, I can see that was the nail in the coffin. I wish I had realized it sooner, but hindsight is 20/20, right? After receiving that message from David, I was overwhelmed. It was like a punch to the gut, and I spent several days just rereading it and letting it all sink in. Each time I went through it, I felt a new wave of guilt and regret. I realized just how much I had taken him for granted, and it tore me apart. Eventually, I knew I had to face this head on, so I reached out to David and asked if we could talk in person. Thankfully, he agreed, and we set a date to meet up. We ended up meeting at his brother's house. I remember walking up to the door and feeling like my heart was in my throat. It was a mixture of dread and a tiny bit of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could fix things. But as soon as I saw him, I knew things were different. There was a heaviness between us, a weight that hadn't been there before. We sat down and had a very long conversation. It was the most honest and raw conversation we've ever had. There were tears, lots of them, from both of us. I apologized over and over, trying to convey just how sorry I was, how much I regretted everything. But David, he was calm, almost too calm, and that scared me. He told me he didn't want to come back to me. He didn't want us anymore. He said he wants a divorce. Hearing those words broke me. I felt like the ground was pulled out from under me. He explained that nothing I do now will ever make up for what I've done. He said he tried so hard to make things work. He waited for me to change, but I never did. And now it's too late. He said that ship has sailed, that it's left the shore, and there's no bringing it back. He apologized, and that's when I knew it was really over. We both cried a lot. I begged, I pleaded, but David remained firm. He said he can't forgive me no matter what, and I could see that he meant it. This wasn't a decision he made lightly. It was something he'd been thinking about for a long time, and now he was ready to move on without me. When I got home, I just broke down. I cried until I had no tears left. I felt, and still feel, completely heartbroken. This is the man I've spent so many years with, the man who loved me despite all my flaws, and now he's gone. I can't believe I let him slip away, all because I was too caught up in my own selfish pursuits. I prioritized things that don't matter over the one person who mattered most to me. So I guess that's it. We're getting a divorce, and he's done with me for good. I don't know how to move forward from here. I feel like I've lost everything. I hate my life right now, and I'm struggling to come to terms with the fact that I ruined the best thing that ever happened to me. Thank you to everyone who tried to get through to me earlier. I wish I had listened sooner. For those who are going through something similar, please don't take the people in your life for granted. Don't make the same mistakes I did. Hold on to the ones who love you, because once they're gone, there's no getting them back. I'm not sure what comes next for me, but I know I have to face it, one way or another. Thanks again for all the support. Update. Hey Reddit, it's me again. I know a lot of you have been messaging me, asking for an update, and I appreciate the concern more than I can put into words. Honestly, I didn't want to post again until I had something significant to share. I needed some time to process everything that's been happening. But here I am with an update, even though it's not exactly the kind of update I hoped I'd ever have to give. First off, I want to say thank you to everyone who reached out to me, whether it was to offer advice, share your own experiences, or just to check in on how I'm doing. I've received so many DMs, and I'm trying my best to reply to all of them. It's been overwhelming in both good and bad ways, but I promise I'll get through them eventually. Now, as for the actual update, I got served. A few days ago, I officially received the divorce papers, and that's pretty much it. There's no more ambiguity, no more hoping for a miracle or a change of heart. This is happening. We're getting divorced. Since David left, life has been moving at a snail's pace. Each day feels longer than the last. He still hasn't come back to the house, and it's just this empty, quiet space that feels too big for me now. It's funny how a place can feel so different when you're the only one in it. The house is in both of our names since we bought it together, so I guess we'll have to figure out what to do with it. Maybe we'll sell it, or maybe I'll try to buy him out. I don't even know if I can stand to live here anymore, to be honest. David barely talks to me now. I've tried reaching out a few times, but he's just distant. And who can blame him? I do check his social media, though, like some kind of masochist. He seems happier without me, and while that's what I want for him, it just makes me feel even more miserable. It's like watching someone walk away from a burning building. You're glad they're safe, but you're still standing in the flames, wondering how you let it get this bad. As for me, I'm completely miserable. There's no other way to put it. I don't have David here to do things for me anymore, to be there for me, and I feel that loss every single day. There's a difference between being lonely and being alone, and I never truly understood that until now. When David was here, I was lonely because I took him for granted, but at least he was still there, still trying. Now I'm alone, and the loneliness is suffocating. It's just me, bouncing between home and work, with nothing in between. No one waiting for me when I get home, no one to share the little moments with. Our friends, or rather our mutual friends, have tried reaching out to me. They've been supportive, but it's clear they're all on David's side. And honestly, I can't even blame them. They saw what I didn't, the way he struggled, the way he tried so hard to make things work while I just didn't. It's like they've all formed this protective circle around him, and I'm on the outside, looking in. I haven't felt like talking to any of them, so I've just isolated myself even more. It feels like a punishment I deserve, but it's also so lonely. So yeah, I got served. It's official. We're getting divorced, and there's no going back. I cry all the time now, which is ironic because I'm the one who set all of this in motion. I'm the one who pushed him away, who didn't see what I had until it was gone. And now, I'm just here, dealing with the consequences of my actions. I'm miserable, and there's nothing I can do to change it. This is my reality now. Damn. Update. Hello, Reddit. I still keep on getting requests for an update, and even though I don't have much to share, I'll just use here as a place to vent and as a soundboard. I keep on looking back figuratively. It's hard to understand how I let things get to this point. I know I made mistakes. I see that so clearly now, but knowing doesn't make it any easier. Every time I think about what David said, how he doesn't want to come back, how he's done with us, it feels like a knife in my chest. The worst part is knowing that no matter how much I regret what I did, I can't undo it. I can't go back and be the partner he deserved. I'm stuck in this loop of what ifs. What if I had just been more present? What if I hadn't dismissed his feelings? What if I had celebrated his achievements the way he always celebrated mine? Maybe then we wouldn't be here. Maybe then he'd still be mine. But it's too late for that now. The loneliness is the hardest part. I didn't realize how much I relied on David until he was gone. Not just for the big things, but for the little things too. His smile when I came home from work, the way he'd always ask about my day, even the way he'd tease me when I was being stubborn. All those moments are just memories now, and they hurt more than I can explain. I've tried to stay busy, to distract myself, but nothing really helps. Work doesn't feel the same. It used to be a refuge, a place where I could lose myself in tasks and deadlines, but now it just feels empty. Home doesn't feel like home anymore. It's just a house, filled with reminders of everything I lost. I think about moving, starting fresh somewhere new, but I don't even know if that would help. The problem isn't the place, it's me. David was my rock, and now that he's gone, I feel like I'm drifting. I'm trying to find my footing, trying to figure out who I am without him, but it's hard. It's so damn hard. I miss him every single day, and the thought of him moving on without me is almost unbearable. But I know I have to face it. I know I have to accept that this is the life I created for myself. So that's where I'm at. I wish I had something more hopeful to share, but this is my reality now. I'm just trying to take it one day at a time, to figure out what comes next. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I have to find a way to keep going, even if it feels impossible right now. Thank you again to everyone who has reached out, who has offered advice, or just a kind word. It means more to me than you know. I'll keep you all updated as I figure out what's next, but for now, I'm just trying to make it through each day. Update. Hey Reddit, it's me again. Just a mini update because I promised to keep you all posted until the divorce is finalized. Though, to be honest, I don't know why I'm updating today. I actually planned to do this tomorrow during my lunch break, but I really needed a place to vent, so here I am. So David came by today to pack the rest of his stuff, like literally today. He didn't come alone. He brought a couple of our mutual friends with him to help. Watching them carry out boxes and load up the truck felt like a punch to the gut, like I was watching the last pieces of my old life slip away. What made it worse was how David kept trying to check on me. Every few minutes he'd ask how I was doing or if I was okay. I know he meant well, but honestly, it just made everything feel worse. It felt like he was trying to ease his own guilt or something, like he could somehow make this less painful by showing he still cared. But what's the point? It's not like I can have him anymore, so his concern just felt like salt in the wound. I ended up brushing him off, telling him to just get on with his packing. I know that probably hurt him, and I could see our friends glaring at me, but I couldn't bring myself to care. I'm hurt too. I'm miserable. I'm going through hell. And seeing him there, acting like he still cared, only reminded me of everything I've lost. Now the house feels even lonelier, if that's even possible. Before, at least some of his things were still around, like little remnants of the life we had. But now it's just me and the silence. Every room feels empty, and it's like I can't escape the reality that I brought this on myself. I pushed him away, and now he's really gone. So yeah, that's it. Nothing major to report, just another layer of sadness to add to the pile. I'm not sure what comes next. Maybe selling the house, maybe trying to figure out how to move forward. But right now, all I can feel is the weight of my own mistakes. I guess this is what happens when you take someone for granted. Thanks for listening, Reddit. I'll keep you all updated, but for now, I just needed to get this off my chest. Update. Hey Reddit, I promised myself not to update until after the divorce was finalized, and now that it has been, I owe you all at least one final update. The divorce process was pretty straightforward. David and I didn't have any debts to split. Our finances had been separate for a while before this. We'd only been married for 5 years, so there was no spousal support or alimony to consider. No kids meant no child support issues either. The main concern was the house. Initially, I thought about just selling the house and splitting the proceeds with David. The house was a painful reminder of everything that went wrong, and I figured moving on might be easier if I could just let it go. But as time passed, I came to realize something important. The house wasn't the problem. I was at fault, not the house. And if I sold it, I'd be losing the last physical connection I had to David. The house was like a symbol of our life together, and despite all the pain, it was also a part of my past with him that I wasn't ready to let go of. So, after a lot of reflection, I decided to buy David out. He agreed, and that was that. I'm still here, living in the house. It feels a bit like a double-edged sword. While it's a constant reminder of what went wrong, it's also the last piece of our life together that I have left. Now it's just me, trying to navigate life one day at a time. I felt like I owed you all this last update since you've been so supportive and helpful throughout this process. And so yeah, that's where things stand. Thanks for being there and for all your advice.